Actus stands for Algorithmic Contract Type Unified Standard. So first of all, it is a standard. Now there are many standards out and maybe a few too many. So if Actus just would be another standard, it wouldn't be worthwhile. What makes Actus special as a standard in the financial world is the A, the algorithmic. Generally, if it comes to standard in the financial analytics space, what people tend to do is to standardize the attributes of a contract, to give proper and unanimous meaning to what a certain attribute means. Like, for example, maturity date, or notional, or principal, these kind of things. With Actus, we have recognized that the financial contract is not uniquely defined by its attributes. It is uniquely defined by its attributes and the cash flow generating algorithms. So in Actus, we define a standard which has in its center a cash flow generators, where you give input data and where the meaning of the data truly is defined by these algorithms, which are the cash flow generators, which turn these inputs into expected cash flow, like, for example, a payment here, interest payment here, principal payment here. We will talk about this later, but generally, Actus defines the data and the algorithms, which unanimously define a financial contract. Financial contracts are exchange of cash against cash. So I give you some money, you have to give me some money back. That's what it is. So there is always a timeline involved, T, and maybe, let's say I give you a loan, so I give you money here. Here you promise to return the money, maybe in between you pay some interest, some fees or whatever it is. This is a simple contract, it can be more complex, but that's the basic nature of a financial contract. A financial contract is an exchange of cash flows, and the cash flow is a unit of currency, say like dollar here. And currencies, unit of currencies are pure units comparable to meter, seconds, or grams. This means they are so there's a single dimension, and they can be purely represented by numbers. So I give you $5, and then we know exactly what I have to give you. If, for example, I tell you I give you 5 apples, there's a lot to dispute. It can be small, big, old, fresh, green, red, and so on, sweet. With $5, there cannot be a dispute. So $5 really mean $5. This means that these cash flows can be represented by pure numbers. Maybe this payment is 7, this is also 7, maybe this is 50, maybe that was maybe plus 50 for me, minus 50 for you, something like that. So that's the first thing. So it's an exchange of cash flows which can be fully represented by numbers. In addition, these numbers here, they are all connected with each other. So this number with this and this, and this, there's a connection between them, and these are like mathematical or logical formulas. Also called algorithms. Okay. So the financial contract is therefore representable by algorithms. Some initial input factors. We have some initial input factors, for example, like how much I gave you here, how often you pay interest, how high the interest rate is. Given that, plus these algorithms, we can calculate everything. Okay. That makes the financial contract very special, because it can be fully represented by math, or it's inherently mathematical. All other contracts, take a wedding contract, can never be defined so exactly. There will be always a lot of dispute if something goes wrong, and the judge has to be there. In financial contract, there are situations when somebody stops paying, where things can become unclear, but they are very, very rare. They are very rare. Basically, you have collateral. For example, I gave you a loan for a house. We know what you have to pay. You stop paying. I know the house is mine. You know, even these are clear rules. Huh? So it's very well defined. I start with a very simple contract, like I give you a loan, which you have to pay me back after a certain time. Looks the same as what I drew already. So there is a time, let's say initial exchange date. There is a maturity date. That's the date when you have to give it back. I give you 100 here. So for me minus is 100. You give me 100 back here, plus 100 for me. And let's say we pay 3 times interest rate. And maybe if this is a year, 1 year, and let's say we pay 5%, so then you pay me 5 here, and 5 again here. So everything is clear once we have these input parameters, like the amount, these 2 dates, this cycle length, the interest rate, and everything is clear. That is one pattern. We call it PAM, generally, which stands for Principal at Maturity. That means I pay everything at once at the end. So that is one contract. This contract is very popular. Most bonds are like that, government bonds, but many loans which you take look exactly the same. Deposits even. Another one, if I take this one off, classical is a mortgage. And a mortgage actually follows what we call an annuity. An annuity is you pay once at the beginning a lot, and then for a long time you give me equal payments. So that is what an annuity is. So I gave you 100. Now I give you have to give me back, maybe often it's 10 years, 20 years, every month, a certain amount, which includes interest and principal. So the formula is rather complex, so we are not going into the formula, but it shows, so you will have long, you have payment, and maybe here it stops. Here. So the MD will be here. So you see this contract looks very, very different to the first contract. But what they have in common, both can be described by algorithms, but the algorithm for this one, we call this one as in short form ANN for annuity. This one has a different formula to generate the cash flows than the first one. Or if you want to take as a last example, let's say a swap. A swap, a plain vanilla swap, is basically you exchange at a certain date 2 contracts at the same time. Actually 2 PAMs. We had already before the PAM, but I give you a loan and you give me a loan at the same time. I give you a loan of 100 and you give me a loan of 100. So you wonder, why do we do that? Because they are slightly different, the 2 loans. Let's say I give you a fixed rate, but you give me a variable rate. Meaning the variable rate means it changes if the market conditions changes. And I have to give you the same payment all the time. So that has to do with risk, etc. So we have basically, again, an initial exchange date. So I give you 100, you give me 100. So these two will cancel out. You will give me 100 back, and I will give you 100 here. They will also cancel out. But you give me now fixed interest rates. So these interest payments will be of the same height all the time. And I give you variable interest payments, so that depends then on certain market conditions. If, for example, the interest rate here is low, then I give you so much. Now the interest rate is going to rise, I give you more, maybe even more, and maybe then it drops again, something like that. So that will be then the exchange of cash flow, and of course we exchange only the net of it. And each of these patterns, again, they follow the same rules as the one which I showed you at the beginning. This one follows similar rules, but you see there was an additional rule that the rate changes with the market conditions. And so on. So all the financial contracts, they have certain patterns. And such a certain pattern we call contract types. Contract type. So it's a contract and a certain exchange of how we do the exchange. And each contract type is a function of some initial data and some algorithm. Here. Okay, and we can say CTI, so the contract I follows the initial data I and the algorithm I. Here. Okay, so that's how they work. And the formulas in the background we don't have to care too much now about, but this is important to know. There are some initial parameters and there are certain algorithms, and the algorithms are known, and almost all the people in finance know those algorithms, or at least a lot of people, enough people to make finance run. So, because they follow fully well-defined algorithms and initial data, this can be managed by computers fully here. These contracts, they are transacted by banks using what we call transaction processing systems. So when you go to the bank, you get a loan, so the person finally types in the loan, and then the computer takes over. Actually, little, or in ideal case, no human interaction. If you have an account at the bank, the money will be withdrawn automatically and to the end of the life, as long as you pay. Of course, if you do not pay anymore, then it becomes a little bit more complicated. Okay. So that is generally the notion of the contract types, of the contracts, of the financial contracts. They are very special. The only contract which is inherently mathematical. They work via these functions here, initial conditions and functions, and then we have many different examples. So, if we look now at all the contracts which are out there in the world, then let me erase that. We have the following conditions. So we have, let's say these are all contracts. And then there are two main branches. One is the credit enhancements. And the other one are what I just said, the cash flow exchange. So here we define how do we exchange the cash flows. Here we define what happens in case of default. So here we have them basically, first of all, the basic ones are collaterals and guarantees. And then we have the more advanced, like CDOs, etc. In the cash flow exchange, we have here first what we call basic contracts, and then we have combined. Okay? The first group we call the basic group, the second the combined. Basic contract is what you generally know from your experience with banks. If you have a loan, that is a basic contract. A combined is a combination of such basic. From our previous example, the PAM was a basic contract, and the swap where we exchanged two with each other, that was a combined. And we also call them often derivatives. Okay, basics are made up of fixed income, is the first. Income. Then we have the index contracts. Fixed income is everything which is related to interest, and we have here maturity, and here the non-maturity. Maturity contract are well-defined contracts like the mortgage, where we exactly know what we have to go to exchange. So here we have many. One we call PAM, that was the example which I showed you. Then we have AN, that was another example. Then we have linear amortizer. We have a perpetual bond, and a few more here. Non-maturity are basically the saving account and current account. If you have a saving, so there it's not clear when you draw. You can draw anytime, you can put anytime. So the first one we call UMP, stands for undefined maturity profile, and cash. Here, index products are stock and commodities. Okay. Combined, we have what we call symmetric combined. And then we have options. Now, why do we call them symmetric? Symmetric means the chance of winning and losing, it follows a symmetric pattern. For example, if interests go up, you get more. If interests go down, you get less. And this is different with options. If I have an option with you, and I am the option holder, so I got an option, you gave me an option, so then I can only win. But I had to pay you something in the beginning. So it's asymmetric. So once I have paid you, the only thing which can happen, either you pay me nothing or you pay me something. I'm never going to pay you something. So that's why there are options, or you could also call them asymmetric, but they are known more under the title of options. And the symmetric ones, we have the interest rate swap. That one is the one which I showed you. You have futures. We have FX out, FX outright, so where we exchange just two different currencies. I think these are the main ones. In options, we have again two groups. So we have the plain vanilla. So these are then American, Bermudan, and European options. And then we have exotic options like leather or knock-in, etc. So these are, we don't have to go into the detail, these are strange ways of exchanging payments depending on something here. And these are American, Bermudan and European options. So I pay you, you can exercise the option always, sometimes, or only at the end. Okay, so, but this is an overview over all the financial contracts which are out there, and we basically we have about a little bit less than 30, a little bit more than 30. I think there are currently about 32 contract types. And the estimation is, that's my estimation, that has to be proved yet, but my estimation, it covers well beyond 99%. Interesting, if you only look at 4 or 5 patterns, especially this PAM, this is an important one, most of the mortgages are annuities, most of the bonds are principal of maturities, all saving accounts are UMPs here, and then if you take the interest rate swap, and if you take yet collaterals, that's a very important contract here. So if these only 2, 4, 5 contracts, they explain probably close to 90%, or maybe not totally, but close to 90%, which is out there. So that means the big part of finance follows a very few patterns. So we have, like, let's say 5 or 6 patterns for 90%, and then so with 20% of the contract types, you explain maybe 90%. And the rest of the contract types, they are more rare, and they sum up to the rest here. So with Actus, we already cover. We have covered these. Maybe I can do it in blue. This one exists, this one exists. Actually, exotic versions here we have about 5 more about, which we have here. This one we have this. Then we have this, this we are working on, these exotic types here. We have all this here, we have this here. So the only thing which we miss currently is the exotic options and some of the exotic credit risk derivatives. And a few of these basic maturity, which are very rare. The rest already exists. For most banks, this is 100%. Actually, far more than 100%. Many banks, they only trade with 2 or 3 contracts.